Last but not least, Oleg Polyakov, who is senior manager at Dell Technologies in Ottawa, in Canada. And there he's leading the development of OAM, so Operations Administration and Maintenance in the Dell Run program. And he's also an open source evangelist. And he will now talk about open sourcing OAM. Oh, yeah, the best is not to click there, choose this.
Next, back.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Cool. Hello, guys. So yeah, thank you for the introduction. I'm Oleg Polyakov, as mentioned, and I'm working for Dell Technologies. I'm sitting in Ottawa, where is probably the big part of what Dell Technologies is doing around O-RAN and 5G. So first of all, it's my first actually time to attend this type of conference, and I would like to thank the organizers for this opportunity. And you know what, even first of all, as far as I understand, this is the last talk before the lunch. So I will make it short and lightweight. And even before running the slides, I would like to share the elephant in the room, that actually why I am here. I have a very strict goal from this conference. I'm leading the development of OAM. And the team believes, and even more than that, the team knows that we have a very solid piece of software that even yesterday was already almost fully compliant with OpenAirInterface standards. So the idea that came out of the team is, let's go and open source it, because it's a generic and very nice piece of software that the whole industry can gain from it. And we obviously came with this idea to our managers, and the managers told us, so we don't want to open source something that will sit aside and no one gonna use, right? We want to open source it in order to build and gain the live community of contributors that actually will help the whole industry. And this is a serious investment. So I was assigned the task to come back to the management and say how much of an interest this type of open source gonna have in the industry. I tried to push back saying, guys, in order to understand the interest, we should first open source, let it grow, promote, and then we'll understand the interest, but it's not how it works. So I'm in type of chicken and egg situation, and what I hope I will gain from this conference, that I will be able to come to my managers and say, guys, wow, you don't know how much of an interest was expressed in that conference. Almost all the major players, if not all of them, came to me saying, wow, go open source, and we'll join that effort, at least as the consumers and even maybe as the contributors. So this is actually pretty much all. Now a little bit of boring slides just to show the details. So yeah, let's go. Something is should work like this.
Yes. So let's try this.
So never mind. I'll keep talking in the meantime. So first of all, before I start, I should probably share what Dell Technologies is doing in the O-RAN area, right? So don't go into details. Never mind about the next slide even. So I will just talk about it. So what Dell is doing in the O-RAN area is actually two major things. The first one is Dell is very active in the whole bunch of activities in O-RAN ecosystem. That is standards groups, industry associations, and so on. You can see it on the left side. And on the right side, you see the other area where Dell Technologies is very active, and this area was actually exposed in the World Mobile Conference in Barcelona. These are activities around the L1 acceleration, mostly as integrator of different pieces of hardware and so on. So I'm not there. I'm developing OAM. Okay, so now let's speak a little bit about this. So you probably all know this diagram, right? It actually shows the architecture of O-RAN with all the network, with network functions and nodes, types of CU, DU, RU, and so on. And of course, there is a management interface that is called OpenAirInterface that connects all those pieces through the piece of software that I'm going to talk about, that is OAM, to the northbound, that is small network controllers, management systems, and so on. So this piece of software that actually acts as an O1 server, this is what I'm talking about. Okay, the next slide is probably the most important slide, at least from my side, just because it shows why our approach could be helpful for the industry. And the reason is pretty obvious. It's a generic approach. What it actually means is that we have our OM framework exposing some type of simple interface. And together with this interface, we expose the software development kit. And what this software development kit actually allows, it allows the vendors or the developers of the nodes, network functions, to create a very tiny and simple piece of software that is, we call it OM node adapter. That is a simple plugin that once you develop it, your node will be easily pluggable into our OM framework and will receive all the required services, configuration, alarms, statistics, and so on. And you can even see underneath here this naive picture of coffee machine. So you can take this SDK, implement the node adapter for your coffee machine, and it will get all these services through our framework. Ask questions, guys, if you have. So the next slide is not relevant for this forum, but this is the major slide that I'm using to convince our managers why it's a good idea to open source stuff, right? You see here all the nice slogans about why to open source, but I really hope that in this forum, there is no one who really needs to be convinced about that. Okay, so a couple of details about what we are actually planning to open source. On the left side, you can see this gray column actually showing like a stack, all the players on the O1 interface, starting from the network function, then going northbound, you see the backend server that actually aggregates all the O1 services. It is communicating through the netcom server to the SMO, EMS, and so on. So this is on that column. And in that column, actually, what are we planning to open source? So first of all, the OEM application. Together with the OEM application, we plan to open source two SDKs. One SDK that is needed to implement that, remember, OEM node adapter that will plug the network functions to our OEM. The other SDK allows to plug our application to the netconf server. And these are actually the major pieces of that open source that I hope will happen pretty soon. But together with that, we would like to fill up the whole stack. So what we're gonna open source is a couple of reference implementations. Some type of simple implementation of the network function, just to give an example how it all works. From that point of view, we will probably open source the integration with some netcom server like NetOpeer, something like an open source. And I hope the integration, or maybe a simple example of network controller, maybe something like ONAP related or so. So this is about that. And the next slide is actually about the status of our current implementation. You can see here the major services or requirements of the O1 interface standard. And on that side, you see how compliant our software currently is related to that. And you can see that most of the areas were sort of fully compliant. FM, like fault management, PM, performance management, PNF startup, file management, heartbeat management, and so on. There are three areas that were not fully compliant there that related to the trace management, cloudified NF registration, and PNF reset management, but it's also coming pretty soon. So just wanted to share with you that we feel that our current implementation is pretty solid. So this is actually why I came here. So the question to you guys, and hopefully feel free to talk now or reach out to me later. So would you guys be interested in this type of open source project? And if yes, what do you think gonna be your involvement there as a contributor or as a consumer? So I should say that I'm pretty much done. A little bit of a technical slide. I don't know if these technical details are really important in my talk, but they are actually showing the APIs that are part of our SDK. So they are grouped here by the major areas of the O1 service. Yeah, I think we're almost done, even fully done. So again, thank you for this opportunity and really helped me to go through this obstacle that I currently have in Dell Technologies and let me know. Yeah. Tell me that it's very important.
All right. Thanks, Oleg. And it's a nice presentation and a great idea as well. And I got a couple of questions. This O1 interface, you're following the working group 5 O1 definitions data models as well?
We are mostly focused on work group 10.
Now it's moved to work group 10, I believe,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, okay. So you are also considering the front-haul plane in this case, or?
Definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Definitely is there.
So my question is a little bit different. In the current activities in ORAN, they have this cloud native OAM, and it's a similar construct or concept that you have a shared OAM M&S service for multiple NFs that are contained, but it's still bounded by the network element. So it's still all one vendor product. Is that what you're actually looking at? Is that it's an SDK to be able to provide that still northbound from the network element perspective? Or are you looking at, well, we're going to introduce a new adapter or a new module between the SMO and the NFs running in the cloud?
So in our current implementation, when we're talking about OAM, OAM is running as part of the node, or mostly as part of the server. So that server, you can have multiple nodes deployed there, and in our implementation, you will have one single OAM, actually meaning that never mind how many network functions are deployed in that server, this server will introduce one O1 interface through our OAM framework.
So it'd be more related to the pod or cluster then?
Yeah.
So I guess I'll be the wet blanket on this one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, the concern would be that you got an OAM server, right? That's typically embedded within the network function. It doesn't have to be part of it can have a different container and everything else. So my first question for you, and then it's a follow-on second question of, we're just moving the rope now that we had a standardized O1. That's the first question. A standardized O1 down to a CU. Now I've got a standardized O1 down to a CU that has to go through an adaptation layer that goes through a non-standardized SDK interface, right? And how do we think we're solving the industry's problem by introducing another layer in that adaptation layer in the stack?
So anyway, there is no standard plugin into the network functions themselves, right? So we introduce this type of, I don't know if it's the right phrasing to say this type of standardization, but at least we sort of came up with the idea of some common denominator of these types of interfaces, and we introduce these interfaces as part of our SDK. So if you have your own CU or DU or any other network function, right? You take this SDK, you see the simple interfaces, you implement the plugin for your network function, and that's how it will connect you to OAM, netcon server, and northbound.
Okay,
Sure.
so that's what I was saying. So now we've introduced another I don't care, call it an SDK, call it an API, but it's another set of interfaces that I have to write to instead of an O1 interface.
Yeah, but you will
go back to your other, I understand. Go back to your other slide so that you had with the architecture. No, keep going. Yep, that one. No, keep going. The one with inline. There you go. So the situation is that typically this stuff gets packaged. The O1 server is part of a package. It's not part of an necessarily, I guess it could be part of OCloud software, but you have to allow for different variations in this. And so I hope that if we go through this, we allow for different variations where, you know, a CUCP would include like maybe an OAM server on one particular instances, others don't have them, you know, that whole variation of the pieces of it. And so that depends on how well that OAM module gets deployed and allowed to be packaged in with the other functions. So I can just deploy an ORAN network function. It may very well have its OAM server, right? Or I can deploy a combo OAM function that does CU and DU, and it has its own OAM server as part of it. So that's one of the things I would see, that if you choose to do this in an open source, that at least you allow for those architectural constraints. It's not always just an OAM server that's OCloud platform software independent of any ORAN NFs that get deployed.
Yeah, so deployment-wise, this OAM server could be in a one-to-one relationship with network function, or it could be in one-to-many relationships with network functions running in that same server with OAM. The OAM is hiding behind the netconf server, so it communicates northbound. If I go here, you see the netconf server northbound from OAM. So this is the interface of our framework northbound towards the network management. It is packaged with netconf server together. But if you are asking about containerization and so on, so the variety of deployments available.
Yes. So the idea is that you open source it, and then you basically develop other features in it, right?
Of course, no. We open source it. We build all the stuff that community needs, like cloud-based CI/CD, all the processes, procedures, pull requests, and so on around that. We promote it, and we keep growing it, hopefully together with the partners.
Okay, very good.
All right. I think.
Thank you.
Thank you, Oleg. I think maybe you even had the hardest job, kind of the last talk before the lunch break, and overall the last talk in the last presentation session. So we will now follow up with finally the lunch break that will be provided outside. Let's say 1 hour. Maybe the demo presenters and poster presenters, they want to go right now and eat before then all the masters come there, because after you have eaten, you can again go up like yesterday, and then we will have for a good 2 hours the demo presentations and also posters. And otherwise, I would like to thank you for your participation, because it's the last time that I will be speaking here officially. And yes, I wish you a nice afternoon, a nice demo visit. Thank you for coming to our workshop, and hopefully see you soon again.